E adesso sentiamo un altro grande amico e veramente maestro e fondatore che ha portato così tanti contributi al nostro campo, veramente importanti, a parte lo score che è semplicemente cosa da follow up, ma tutte le manualizzazioni che Peter ha prodotto già alla fine degli anni 90 e agli inizi del 2000 sono stati un esempio e sono stati un grande contributo. E devo dire che anche il capitolo che ha fatto quest'anno nel nuovo volume è veramente interessante. Così lasciamo la parola a Peter direttamente per questa lunga giornata. Vi ricordo comunque che insomma, gli spazi di attenzione sono quelli che sono, però io credo che appunto poterla vedere in registrazione poi sarà ancora più interessante. Io penso che chiederemo la possibilità di metterlo sul canale YouTube di Iskra, così almeno è più facilmente accessibile rispetto al link da chiedere, ma questo è un problema di segreteria, è una proposta che intanto faccio. La parola a te, Peter Stratton. It's your
Thank
time.
you, Mauro. Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
inviting me to this grand occasion. And I hope this is coming through to you in translation. And can I have my overheads, which I hope will also be translated? Splendid. Right. Am I in control? No. Okay. I'm coming from the north of England, so here's a couple of images.
Sì, adesso do il controllo della presentazione.
Great.
Ok, adesso c'è il controllo.
I have to use the buttons. This is the view from my study window, well, a few days ago. This is what it's like in the north of England, but we have other views. But this view takes time to load. This is a nice little village with a pub called the Red Lion, just to show we have civilization up here as well as snow. Okay, I thought I would start with conclusions from the handbook, that it is possible to manualize the practice of a clinic in a way that supports the work of therapists without being restrictive. These are conclusions that emerge from the 33 chapters in the previous handbook, and that a manual can support creative therapy process. Can I check, are you seeing these in English or in Italian? Can someone tell me?
Inglese.
In inglese.
All right, they're not coming up in translation.
It's in English.
Yeah, okay. So in those chapters, it became clear that a manual can function as a secure base, as Franco was talking, and that, of course, manuals are an essential basis for researching effectiveness. I thought I would start with some of my opinions. We have continuously we're being offered new approaches to family therapy. And I should say, I'll talk about systemic family therapy, but I am thinking about the whole range of systemic interventions. But the core is family therapy. So we have new approaches. Usually a new approach is justified by having a superior epistemological position, or at least a more postmodern one, or a post-postmodern one. And very rarely is there any actual evidence offered that the new approach is more effective. So fundamental to what I'm wanting to do in this half hour is to try and tackle what may be a very serious problem for us, that on the evidence we've got, systemic family therapy is no more effective now than it was 40 years ago, which is a really serious problem for us. And my position is that we really need to check what we're doing and provide evidence that it's effective, because therapists are not very good at judging whether they are being effective. So one conclusion is that we don't reject earlier approaches or earlier competencies just because they are older. There is no reason to think they are less effective. And secondly, we really need to track and test our effectiveness. This is not a popular view in systemic family therapy, but we didn't come here to be popular. Okay. Some thoughts about increasing creativity. And again, one of my concerns is that there is an enormous literature about creativity and how to develop it, and our field takes very little notice of these wider literatures. So as a basis, I think we need to emphasize curiosity, exploration, and creative novelty. These ideas are developed in much more detail in my chapter in the new book. Here I'm just sketching out some examples from it. I should also say I have more overheads than I can present in half an hour. And my excuse is that the overheads will be available after this conference, that you can follow them up. So you'll get a glimpse of them, and then I will move on. So I want to talk in terms of schemas, not as grand schemas like a gender schema, but as the minute, continuous activities of the mind, such that whenever you have an input or a thought, you get a flurry of schemas activated, and you have to proceed with those. So when an input comes in, and it might come in from another thought that you're having, or it might come in from something I'm saying, or from the itch in your back, and the schema that gets activated and chosen really in this way of thinking, is not a matching replica of the information, but the schema that enables you to proceed. I did a whole workshop on schemas of pigs on the grounds, well, Bateson said there are no pigs in the brain, and usually there aren't even pictures of pigs in the brain. There is just what you need to know to proceed with whether you're confronted with pancetta or something else. And the core of what I'm saying is that exploration only happens when you feel you aren't adequately matching a schema. I'll diagram this. This is actually a very early work by Ulrich Neisser, who became a political activist after he'd revolutionized cognitive psychology. But at its basis, there is at the top an input of some kind which will activate a schema. And if the schema matches perfectly satisfactorily, that is the end of the process. But if the schema doesn't adequately deal with the input, that directs exploration. And exploration means that you are back sampling from the external reality. Or maybe this diagram gets elaborated in the chapter. It feeds back into the schemas. So you explore your schemas to see whether you have something more usable. This is a core set of ideas, which is fundamentally about that we have a job of keeping exploration going. And that means we have to disrupt habitual processes that close down curiosity. And I've added, if we are in the business of disrupting habitual processes, an obvious one is blaming. If everything goes wrong is John's fault in the family, that's a schema that can cover almost anything. And it excuses you from any curiosity, any elaboration, any questioning, because you've got an answer, an instant answer. So therapy in this frame is about disrupting those habitual processes that close down curiosity and keep questioning, exploration, and therefore creativity going. So if you are exploring, you're sampling from the world, you sample within your schemas, and the theory itself pays a lot of attention to metaphor and hermeneutic circles, which have been attempts to tackle these issues. Suppose a sheep came through the door of the room you're sitting in now. Just as an example of something that you probably don't have a schema for, and you would search for more information. Is there a member of your family the other side of the door laughing, having pushed a sheep into your room? Or what else could it possibly be? It's just for an example of an extreme input that doesn't match any scheme that you've already got. So the core is we are about avoiding premature closure and achieving exploration. Oops. And that, of course, liberates curiosity. And we've got plenty of good ideas about curiosity. I shall jump here. Wanted to introduce one concept from outside. This is a framework provided by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I pronounced that wrong, but everybody calls him Mihaly anyway. And he studied rock climbers, rock dancers, brain surgeons, various people, and came up with this rather simple model, which I think is very practical. And what the model says is, if your level of the challenge of the situation you're in, probably easiest to think of someone rock climbing and finds themselves in a position where their skill is not adequate to deal with the difficulty they're confronting. And he pointed out this is the zone of anxiety. This, of course, is to be applied to us in therapy. And if we find ourselves in a session, what we would say in English is out of our depth, then we start getting anxious, but then we start activating the resources that we've got. On the other half of the square, if your level of skill is much higher than the challenge you're being presented with, you get bored. A colleague recently said to me she'd stopped seeing couples because she's been seeing the same couple for the last 30 years. They all come, she feels by now, with just the same problem, and it's boring. So she's not seeing couples anymore. And Mihaly had this idea that on the diagonal, you're in the area of flow. You're on top of the work, but it's challenging, demanding, and you can thoroughly enjoy it. Okay. Just an example of material from elsewhere again. Sorry, I'll try and keep tabs on my. Okay. I want to just turn us to the evidence-based issue, because I think it is a problem in our field, not a total problem. The relationships between the ways that we judge our effectiveness and other kinds of evaluation. How do you judge the reliability of a newspaper or a magazine? How do you judge the effectiveness of vaccinations for COVID? We know there's a lot of different ways of evaluating these that people have used. It's not a straightforward question, but we do evaluate in our lives altogether. And I'm just saying we really have to evaluate our therapy as well. So each of us could look at our current favorite theory of therapeutic change and say, what would indicate effectiveness in this? By the way, there's been lots of lovely research that shows that therapists are very bad at judging whether their therapy is effective or not. According to one large study, every therapist that they questioned is above average, which mathematically is not possible. Okay. Okay. This is an image that I chose to illustrate the research process for effectiveness that I think is worth saying. Research is a path to an unknown destination. And this was a path you can't see what the destination is going to be. But if you go along the path, you can expect interesting experiences. There is a Greek poem about this. By the time you get to the destination, it may not be, or it almost
Non si sente perché gli si è fermata la linea. Si è bloccato il collegamento.
Vediamo se rientra.
Ah, questo è interessante. Ok, cerchiamo di ripristinare il collegamento.
Però risulta collegato.
Risulta collegato. Io sono in condivisione e non lo vedo.
Mm.
No, io lo vedo. No, adesso no.
Aveva problemi di linea, aveva un po' segnali di linea carente.
No, è caduto, è caduto.
È caduto, infatti.
Ok, proviamo a vedere se si ricollega
Sì, ha
in
avuto
modo rapido.
E la neve, visto la fotografia che ha fatto dello studio ieri, lui in mezzo alla neve.
Sì.
Eccolo.
Ok, Peter, could you hear us?
it's muted me. I'm unmuted,
Okay, now you can go on.
but I don't have control of the slides. Here we
Adesso
are.
ce l'ha.
Now I have it. Okay, that's more or less what I was saying. I thought I should go back to the title of this discussion, that simple things are the most complex. Just to say, as a researcher, a research question can be very simple, like how did the universe start? Or why does your way of doing therapy work? But answering the question is the complex bit. And for much of systemic family therapy research, we have a myth of order, a feeling that it's all well organized, but for researchers, it's very disorganized. So we do need to know whether our therapy is worth doing. Do we have any ethical justification for subjecting our clients to our way of working if we haven't tested it? I'm wanting to be a little bit provocative here. And researching isn't something to be afraid of. Well, I just like this picture from one of our newspapers. I particularly like the use of an asterisk where it said actual size and then, well, not really the actual size. Research isn't as scary as red fire ants, and they're very small. Okay. We have a lot of evidence of effectiveness. And just to say, we've just been working on a new meta-analysis of systemic therapy for depression. That was Martin Pinchard and Andreas Vosler. What they found was that systemic family therapy is effective, is slightly more effective than other therapies, but not in a measurable way, which I think I found disappointing. I believe that what we're doing works, but like a lot of other studies, we don't convincingly come out better than alternatives. And it's just to say, I feel we should be doing better than this. We need to refine what we're doing. I'll break away from these. Someone was saying, if you compare two therapies, systemic therapy or any psychotherapy and therapy for childhood cancer, over the last 40 years, therapy for childhood cancer has improved from 15% to 88% effectiveness. Systemic psychotherapy hasn't improved at all. And the reason, he said, is because every session of treatment for childhood cancer is reported and adds to the database and is used where it can be to improve treatment. And over 40 years, that's been enormously effective. And every therapy that we do, every session, nearly all of them stay private, secret. They don't add, they add to each therapist's wisdom, but they don't add to the knowledge of the field about what works. And we haven't progressed the way other therapies have progressed. I understood that the job of this session was to be provocative, so that's what I'm trying to do. That's my excuse. Okay, I was going to talk about the SCORE outcome measure, but everybody knows about it really, so I'll zip through these. And just if you're not familiar, purely from the research, it seemed that the questions we were able to answer when the families tackled them fell into three areas. So families talked in terms of strengths and adaptability. They talked in terms of being overwhelmed by difficulties, and they talked about disrupted communications. These were the core issues that emerged from it in some ways. These are descriptions that clients who scored most negatively on SCORE offered as descriptions of their families. If you look at those: broken down, lonely, unsupportive, lacking in trust and regard, a war zone, hurt, bitter, cruel. Each of these is a different family, each line. You wouldn't want to live in a family like that. No wonder they came for therapy. But we do pick up some very good descriptions. All right, I just thought, when you do a questionnaire, you sometimes get answers you don't expect. So when we asked what your ethnicity was, someone said a Neapolitan. That apparently is an ethnicity. Well, in Naples it is. Okay. You get unexpected answers. One point I did want to make, and it's interesting, we produce SCORE as a way of measuring outcomes to see whether therapy was effective and to use during the therapy to check that things are getting better. But at least 75% of therapists use the SCORE with the family to discuss with the family. And one very common comment is, if you give the SCORE to the family to complete, it only takes 5 minutes. They might have come in very wound up, blaming, attacking each other, but by the time they've done the 15 items on score, they are oriented towards the family and to thinking in terms of how the family is functioning. It moves them on from the pathological language to be able to talk about the life in the family, which is what we really want to get to. So I've got some elaboration. Yeah, probably to say it's been translated now into, well, actually well over 30 languages, and it does transfer into different cultures. So yeah, this is just advertising score, really. It's a commercial break. And just to say, we've got a version for younger children. If you go to the AFT website, there's an app for Score 15 that you can give to clients or do yourself, fill it in, and it feeds back instantly the results and an analysis of an interpretation of what your scores mean. The other big development, a number of countries have said people who are just a couple don't see themselves as a family and don't find the language in score easy to deal with. And we're developing a version for couples. And that's been a lot of fun. Alan Carr in Dublin has been the leading motivator of this group. It's quite a team. We're all therapists, we're all researchers. We've got a version. We've actually, oh, I'll have to leave that one out, it takes too long. We've actually sent it out to 300 people on the internet, to non-clinical sample, and we're in the process with 18 couples therapists of administering it to couples in therapy so that we can see whether it works. We don't know if it works, but we're hoping. Just wanted to say something about one of our projects was to use manuals as a basis for knowing what competencies systemic therapists have got. And so we took all the manuals that had been used in trials of therapy that showed that it was effective and separated out all of the competencies that were listed in those manuals. Again, there's actually a lot of detail about that in the previous handbook. I particularly wanted to say we've been very fortunate that Guido Rocca has translated the material, and we're hoping to include a chapter from him in the Italian, the new book, with the detail. I don't know if that's readable. This is the map, and in the original, if you click on any place in the map, it opens out specific detail about these competencies, and that's how there are 250 that every systemic family therapist has probably got. My experience with it was, when I looked at it, I recognized all kinds of things that I used to do and that seemed very effective, and that for some reason I'd stopped doing. Okay, so thank you to Guido for that. Final thoughts. This is a kind of summary, and then only one more slide. I want to make claims like research shows that family therapy is effective, but it doesn't show that I'm effective. How am I going to know if I'm effective? Is there an ethical requirement for anyone offering treatment to check their effectiveness? I think the answer is yes. Are therapists good judges of their own effectiveness? No. And I'm afraid if your usual method is to ask the family if it's helping, they will tend to say, yes, doctor, because they're polite and grateful. But it's not an informative answer. It's not a good way of knowing whether things are going well. Okay, I wanted to cause trouble by saying every training course should use a validated test of effectiveness on their students at the end of their training. And then every student who graduated would be able to say they were of proven effectiveness. Of course, some of them wouldn't graduate because they're not effective. At the moment, we don't actually have a way of knowing this. Well, we do, supervisors' judgments. Okay. I wanted to finish some propositions. If we are going to have any discussion, I would want to make some claims. A rigid adherence to a standard procedure is as effective as any other approach. Your answer to that, I guess, is no. And a follow-up question is, how do you know? We don't know. We don't test it. I want to propose that whenever someone proposes a creative new idea for therapy, we should demand that they provide some evidence that it works. Third, creativity is a skill, not a miracle. It needs practice. We need to attend to our creativity and use the available material. There's loads of material out there in the rest of the world that we could use, and systemic therapy doesn't sufficiently. Although both the previous presentations have done a really good job of doing that. Okay, a claim that systemic therapy in 1980 was better for our clients than current ways of doing it. Discuss. I'll jump that one. We don't even very much go out to other areas of systemics. And there is a whole area of soft systems theory, which is developed largely in business, but it's manualized, it's got procedures, and it works to get accommodation between people of different views rather than trying to get consensus. And another suggestion, why don't we just hand the evidence bit over to a different species, that is researchers, so that therapists don't have to do it. Thank you. I think I'm slightly over enthused, but here's some thoughts to leave you with. Thank you.
Bene, mamma mia, Peter. Mamma mia, traduci mamma mia. Quante considerazioni. A chi posso chiedere aiuto per dire qualche cosa in pochi minuti? Forse al vecchio Gregory Bateson, no? Cercare il pattern che connette i papà, i nonni, il cervello destro, il cervello sinistro, le immagini, la parola e la ricerca. È come se fosse entrata una pecora nella stanza e improvvisamente questa pecora rende inadatti gli schemi. E quindi questo è molto interessante, perché quando lo schema è inadatto c'è movimento, c'è differenza e si vanno a cercare nuovi costrutti. Io credo che questo secondo dialogo sia stato molto interessante, come il precedente, peraltro, perché mi dà speranza, no? Perché è rivolto al futuro, perché è propositivo nel senso della determinazione della ricerca, del progresso, del pensare al padre come non solo un seminatore, come neanche sapevano 5.000 anni fa, ma anche come una biologia che si modifica, che, virgolette, diventa mamma però per essere quello che determina la reazione all'aggressività, l'accomodamento alla rabbia nel figlio e quindi determina, no? Quei tratti di maschilità che possono ancora essere utili per la sopravvivenza della specie. Per non parlare del tema dei nonni, no? E del drammatico tema del trigenerazionale, che, come è stato ben sottolineato, purtroppo non è patrimonio del pediatra, non è patrimonio del medico di famiglia, non è patrimonio di nessuno. Quando noi pensiamo a un essere umano lo vediamo lì, ma non lo leggiamo nei suoi bisogni trigenerazionalmente e questo è qualcosa che dobbiamo ancora, su cui dobbiamo veramente lavorare molto per far passare questo concetto da pochi soldi, se vogliamo, da pochi soldi apparentemente, ma determinante per fare una psicoterapia che tenga in considerazione elementi che sono irrinunciabili. E cosa dire di Daniele e del suo contributo? Beh, la parola centrale è il sogno. Io effettivamente sono grato a Tom Ogden perché ho partecipato a diversi suoi seminari nelle mie peregrinazioni negli Stati Uniti, a San Francisco, e mi rimarrà sempre in mente il suo dono rispetto all'interpretazione dei propri sogni al paziente, no? Cioè avermi passato questo concetto, questa possibilità e quindi per tutte le terapie sistemiche l'importanza che Rodolfo ci ha donato in modo consistente sui suggerimenti di Maurizio, eccetera, eccetera, dell'importanza dell'immagine, no? Questa straordinaria necessità di fare in modo che le emozioni si vestano di immagini che a propria volta si vestiranno di parole e torneranno alle immagini e che torneranno alle emozioni rasserenandole. È una visione appunto semplice, alla fine, alla mente, tutta questa complessità torna semplice se la si è digerita. E poi il lavoro di Peter, insomma, cosa dire della straordinarietà del lavoro fatto, per esempio, con il dono delle competenze, no? Ne parlavamo nei nostri online per fare questo librone, in queste conversazioni con George, con Peter, con Carlos, con Camillo. E quando io gli ho detto delle competenze, lui mi dice: Beh, ma Mauro, ma le competenze non è che le abbiamo trovate così. Le competenze siamo andati a vedere in tutte le terapie che sono state fatte, manualizzate, quali erano le cose che funzionavano e quelle che non funzionavano, no? E voglio dire, il fatto che i nostri allievi possano oggi contare sul fatto che ci sono delle competenze che hanno necessità veramente di essere conosciute e sapere quali sono, e beh, è diverso rispetto a quello che ho appreso io quando ero bambino, bambino si fa per dire, no? Io non sapevo quali erano le competenze che avrei dovuto acquisire. La mia mappa era più povera sicuramente di quella di oggi. Le mie orme erano il mio cammino, che è una bellissima poesia, no? Quella di Machado, ma nello stesso tempo, come diceva Gianmarco, insomma, qualche cosina in più ce lo dobbiamo permettere forse oggi, no? Di semplicemente qualche responsabilità in più ce lo dobbiamo permettere. E quindi io credo che, insomma, queste conversazioni, queste tre conversazioni, sono un bel aperitivo per il futuro, no? Nel senso di poter dare ai nostri allievi quelle immagini che ci può essere una certezza, che ci può essere una credibilità e una mh, è un qualche cosa di ontologico e non solamente qualche cosa di radicalmente costruzionista, no? Che è meraviglioso, se vogliamo, da un punto di vista dell'immagine mentale, ma nello stesso tempo così povero per chi fa le politiche sanitarie e chi decide che cosa è cura e chi decide che cosa non è cura. Purtroppo noi non vendiamo farmaci, purtroppo non vendiamo soldi, ma è anche vero che non vendiamo sogni e speranze. Io ho la certezza stupida che le cose che faccio con le persone servano a queste persone. E forse è presunzione questa. Sì, forse è presunzione, però sono contento di essere arrivato a 75 anni, l'età che ho adesso, con l'idea che le parole e le immagini possano curare, che è un'idea molto diversa da quella che avevo a 25 anni, quando mi ricordo a una mia ex fidanzata che era filosofa perché non poteva essere psicologa, dicevo, ma cosa vuoi capire te che non sai niente di anatomia, no? E che non hai le medicine. Quindi questo viaggio che io ho fatto nei 50 anni, noi dobbiamo permettere ai nostri allievi di farlo in molto meno tempo e soprattutto ai nostri clienti. eh? I nostri clienti dobbiamo prenderli nella loro straordinaria ingenuità di ritenere che abbiano la verità in tasca e che sono traditori o che sono stati traditi, di fargli vedere una realtà trigenerazionale, no? E per fare questo oggi forse abbiamo tanti strumenti e le persone che abbiamo sentito stamattina credo che, insomma, ci hanno dato tanto su questo. Io non so quanto tempo ho parlato in questa reverie e quindi abbiamo un pochino di ritardo, ma mi piacerebbe avere un short feedback da Franco, Daniela e Peter.
Posso fare due brevi considerazioni, molto brevi. Allora, intanto la relazione di Peter ha affrontato un argomento che mi è molto caro, sul quale ho lavorato molto, che richiama quello che gli statistici chiamano the dodo bird effect, e cioè che le psicoterapie servono, però è difficile verificare sul piano statistico che un modello di psicoterapia è superiore ad un altro. Servono. Gli aspetti che maggiormente sono associati nell'insieme dei lavori sull'efficacia della terapia alla efficacia terapeutica sono aspetti che riguardano la qualità umana della relazione. E qua mi è venuto in mente un vecchio ricordo che mi collega a Mauro. Io ero un ragazzo, eravamo vicino a Modena ad un congresso organizzato dove c'era Luigi Boscolo, che era una persona molto affascinante. E Mauro fece un commento alla pancia del terapeuta, che voleva dire ha l'attitudine a svolgere il ruolo del terapeuta. Un altro che abbiamo visto questa mattina, avete mai visto una seduta di Maurizio Andolfi? Penso a tutti voi, ma avete visto che straordinarie capacità relazionali ha con la famiglia? Queste sono le cose che dal punto di vista delle evidenze sono associate all'efficacia e al gradimento dei pazienti verso il terapeuta. Quindi io credo che le psicoterapie possono essere approfondite come tecniche e possono anche dimostrare delle loro qualità, ma veicolate dalla qualità della relazione umana. Cioè, ci sono dei terapeuti che sono capaci di essere maggiormente efficaci nell'ambito relazionale. Poi l'altra cosa, poi vado, è questo che è...
Però posso dirti una
Dimmi,
cosa.
te lo ricordi?
Sì, 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 però voglio dire, è vero che è necessaria una buona capacità relazionale, ma non è sufficiente. Con una
No,
buona capacità relazionale posso anche farti diventare un delinquente.
no, assolutamente. La capacità relazionale è come un pittore. Un pittore, per poter realizzare qualcosa di valido, deve avere gli strumenti, ovviamente, fare tecnica, avere i pennelli, avere la tavola, eccetera. Quindi avere le sue tecniche, ma però nello stesso tempo il pittore fa la differenza. E noi siamo un pochino così perché siamo soggetti alle leggi umane. L'altra cosa, questa è un pochino più pessimista. In 35 anni di lavoro all'università italiana, non so cosa succeda in quella inglese, ma all'università italiana viene ogni anno chiesto a ogni studente il suo giudizio personale rispetto alla qualità dell'insegnamento, in modo anonimo. Il problema centrale è che il risultato di queste indagini, il feedback, non viene assolutamente utilizzato dall'università né per lo stipendio né per la carriera dei docenti. Quindi viene totalmente rifiutato come feedback. Ecco, queste sono, scusate, le mie considerazioni.
Prego, la voce.
Ho la voce, non mi sono tolta la voce, che mi piace molto questa idea appunto della speranza di un futuro, anche perché leggendo l'ultimo libro di Umberto Galimberti, L'etica del viandante, è nata in me questa idea anche per le persone giovani di oggi, no? Che non si può più, nell'epoca in cui viviamo, avere una meta e un obiettivo, ma avere un'etica del viandante, cioè c'è un percorso, in questo percorso possiamo incontrare, possiamo andare avanti, perché oggi i pazienti anche più giovani o anche i giovani allievi dicono ma non lo so dove arriverò, non so cosa farò, non è come anche ai tempi miei, no? Che facevi quello e sapevi che c'era una meta, un progetto sicuro a cui arrivare, no? Quindi insomma, mi sembra anche di aver sentito che c'è quest'etica che oggi può essere preziosa, no? Di camminare e incontrare.
C'è anche una domanda per Peter. There is a question from Gianmarco Manfida. He asks about psychotherapy. The fact that the
I'm
psychotherapy.
sorry, I was reading a comment
Okay.
and
Okay.
struggling with that question. I wasn't paying attention. Sorry, can you ask the question again?
Ah, in italiano. Sì, Gianmarco, prego.
Oh,
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
Peter, you told us that there is no proof of improvement in effectiveness of family therapy since 1980. But is there any evidence of improvement for other kinds of therapies, or for any kind of psychotherapy? There is no improvement verified?
The original comment was about psychotherapy generally, but then people have looked at what outcome evidence we have, but back to 1980 we had very little, and we're getting better, but it's I say it to annoy people, in the hope that they will be activated to say, well, we can prove we can do better, and we will actually improve. There is evidence that if people monitor their therapy, they actually do better. There's one study that says if you measure what you've achieved after 4 sessions and the family isn't improving, therapists, you don't have to tell therapists to do something different. They just find something different to do that is more effective. We have the skills, we have the competencies, but as we proceed with therapy, we don't actually know whether we are being effective. I know we get some indications quite concretely from the clients, but it's trying to encourage people to actually take a measure. It doesn't have to be SCORE. There are 257 different outcome measures available to choose from, but I like SCORE. Thanks for the question, though.
So do we. Hope to get in contact with you in the future.
Perfetto.
Yeah.
Benissimo. Per esempio, per chiudere questa bellissima mattinata, un'altra notizia di speranza buona è che stiamo chiudendo con la nostra USL un accordo per fare un programma di prevenzione primaria di tipo sistemico con le coppie nella nostra zona, insieme ad altre agenzie. Insomma, cose che non potevamo pensare certamente molti anni fa. E ovviamente quando ci hanno chiesto ma come fate a misurare? E noi abbiamo detto, lo sappiamo benissimo come facciamo a misurare, oggi abbiamo gli strumenti. E quindi grazie Peter per questo importantissimo dono che ci avete dato. Io direi che ci possiamo fermare qua perché abbiamo un po' di riposo e alle 14 Carlo Sluschi ci presenterà questo suo bellissimo articolo all'interno del libro che si intitola Il tunnel del tempo, che è corredato di una meravigliosa foto con 25 giganti radunati in un meeting in cui Carlos era un giovane ragazzo.